All right, so welcome on to this Q&A. Again, we're welcome on to this Q&A. So I got my voice back mostly, so that's good. I guess the more you don't use it, takes time to heal. Hopefully stay like this. No one will make me out and scream over here. All right, question, also which I want to celebrated or still celebrating Shavuos. It's a judgment on Torah, person's Torah during the year. So one of the reasons we stay up all night, but we want to show, the importance of Torah. Whatever, it's always good that, sleep during the day, make the most of it. But yeah, it's so a lot of people dragging their feet today because, back to the quote unquote the real world. So, you know what they say, no rest for the weary. All right, now a question came in. Interesting question. And that is, I'm going to actually cover it at some point in the book of Leviticus, chapter 18. We're not there yet. But it's a question about bestiality. Now, the question was, is sleeping naked with a dog up against your naked body and private parts considered bestiality? Right? Now, I don't get questions like this so often, but any of the prohibitions in the book of Leviticus, any in chapter 18, any prohibitions that are prohibitions in immorality, right? Who you're allowed to be with, not allowed to be with, right, etc. Even homosexuality or bestiality for a man or for a woman, doesn't really matter. What's forbidden is the act. The act itself is going to be forbidden. Now, that being said, in this case, it's not forbidden, right? I don't think it's a great thing to do, but it's not forbidden, right? In other words, let's say, a person sleeps in the buffet, we would say, whatever, they sleep naked, right? Let's say. So if they have an animal next to them, let's say they rub up against the animal. I don't know. Animal rubs up against them, whatever. Right? We'll try and keep this PG-13, try and keep it clean here. It's definitely not forbidden, right? That's not what makes bestiality forbidden. What makes bestiality forbidden is the act itself. So whether a man does it to an animal or a woman brings an animal onto them, either way, that is what's forbidden. In other words, the act itself. Now, interesting enough, I think I mentioned before that Cleopatra, famous Mark Antony Cleopatra, right, way back when, Cleopatra died. I don't know how many people are aware. Cleopatra died because she wanted to sleep with a horse, and they're going to put a horse, I guess, on top of her. And they dropped the horse, whatever it was, crushed her. That's how she died. Right? So even for a non-Jew would be forbidden. Right? We don't make any discrimination over here. It's a forbidden relationship even for a non-Jew. Right? But the idea is the act itself. Right? It has to be the act itself. You rub up against the animal, again, I don't think it's a good thing, but it doesn't make it bestiality. Any of these forbidden relationships is the act itself. Right? The act itself makes it forbidden. Now, we could say, well, what about touching someone of the opposite sex? Yeah, forbidden relationship. Okay, it's also forbidden. Yeah, touching, hugging, kissing, okay, very good. Right? It's still forbidden. Okay. Person may have to give up their life rather than transgress. Okay. But in the case where the act has not been done, right? I'm gonna put on my camera here. The case where the act itself was not done. There we go. If the act itself was not done, it does not make it bestiality. Again, I would say it's not a good thing to do, but all those forbidden relationships for Jews or non-Jews, right? Certainly in the book of Leviticus, chapter 18. For a Jew, all those forbidden actions means the act itself is forbidden, right? Living together is forbidden. Living together, right, as we understand, means having relations. Yeah. Now, what if they lived together and didn't have relations? What if they were quote unquote married? Again, it's forbidden relationship. 100% a forbidden relationship. Now, even if they weren't intimate, still forbidden, right? The relationship itself is forbidden, right? To have any level of marriage, is forbidden, right? A Kohen marrying a divorcee is forbidden, right? It's going to be forbidden. Now, interesting enough, a friend of mine once told me many years ago, he had a friend that was a Kohen that was, I guess, was married to a divorcee, or was going to marry a divorcee, whatever it was. And this guy said, this Kohen, it's a forbidden relationship. Torah says forbidden relationship. Kohen cannot marry a divorcee, right? Other people can't marry also. It doesn't really matter. But the point is, this guy claimed, he said, okay, what's the worst thing? First of all, it's a Torah prohibition. Okay, but what's the worst thing? So he said, if I have kids, so my kids won't be Kohanim. My kids will be what we call a halal. A halal means it's a Kohen who's blemished. And that Kohen cannot serve in the temple. That Kohen wouldn't be allowed to serve in the temple. So he said, like this. So the person said, okay, what's the worst thing? The worst thing, my kids will not be Kohanim. They won't be able to serve in the temple. Okay. That's what this guy claims. So my friend said that's not the worst thing. I mean, that's bad. No one's going to say it's not bad. It's definitely bad. These are what, your kids can't serve, right? They're not really Kohanim, right? Or let's say they're Kohanim with a blemish, doesn't really matter. They're not going to be able to serve. Can't do anything a Kohen could do anyway at this point, right? But that's not the worst prohibition. That's bad. Yeah. What's the worst part of the prohibition? The worst part of the prohibition is, we understand it's a forbidden relationship. Yeah, and what if they did it? Yeah. What if he married a divorcee? So he said he already did it, big deal. That's, you say fine. And one prohibition. But the problem is that they're married. Now, most people that are married, again, we'll keep this clean, that most people married are not living a platonic relationship. They're going to be intimate, right? That's the way it works. Yeah, they're going to be intimate. Very good. Now, in this case, every time, and again, it's not the woman's fault. It has nothing to do with the woman over here. Yeah, it's not her fault. Not, but again, she's part of the prohibition. So therefore, every time he's intimate, whether he has kids or not, doesn't really matter. Every time he's intimate, Torah prohibition. So this idiot says, the worst part is my kids won't be real Kohanim. They won't be able to serve. No. That's not the worst part. That's bad. The worst part is every time they're intimate, it's a Torah prohibition for him. The prohibition for the Kohen. Right. Yeah. So the relationships over here in Leviticus chapter 18, which I haven't got to, right? Still stuck on the second verse, but and I'll probably be there for the next number of weeks. We go back to our normal schedule on Sunday. Nonetheless, all those prohibitions, all those forbidden relationships, it means not only they can't be married, that's certainly a prohibition, but every time they're intimate, it's a prohibition, right? It's not just when they're married, right? So all those prohibitions, who they're not allowed to be with, right? The person's not allowed to be with. Then you get homosexuality, then you get the bestiality, there's a verse in between, speaks about idolatry. Okay, it's not about the thought either, right? Normally we say by a person's thoughts, normally we say, Dvarim Shabalev Ein Dvarim. Words in my heart don't matter. in general. Can't be punished necessarily for your thoughts, except for a number of things. Right? One is idolatry. If a person in their mind, without bowing down, without bringing incense to this idol, or anything that's forbidden to do, there'd be a Torah prohibition of serving the idol. If in their mind they say JC is my God, or little fat guy Buddha is my God, yeah, if they say anything like that, that's a Torah prohibition of idolatry. We just said things in your mind don't mean anything. By idolatry accounts, by immorality accounts, also. So let's say a person, is daydreaming, whatever, even though they don't do anything, with anybody else. It's a thought that counts. So a person is penalized because of your thoughts in these cases. In most other cases, probably not. Probably not. But there are 20 some odd verses of all these prohibitions in Leviticus chapter 18 that tell me it's forbidden. It's forbidden over here. The act itself makes it forbidden. Right? The act itself makes it forbidden. Being married makes it forbidden. Even though there is no act. Right? Even if there's no intimacy. Being married is forbidden. Uncovering their nakedness is forbidden. Seemingly, even if you don't do the act. That's what it says. Right? I'm going to go through it soup to nuts. Right? When we go through it. But it's talking about uncovered nakedness. Now, uncovered nakedness doesn't necessarily mean you do the act. Yeah? We'll have to see different levels over here. Right? But seemingly over here by bestiality, right? Since animals, are naked in general, it doesn't really matter. That's not the prohibition. The prohibition is the act itself. The act itself is going to be a Torah prohibition. Now, we don't discriminate over here between a man and a woman, right? It's going to be just as forbidden for a woman as it is for a man. Not only that, it'll be forbidden for non-Jews also, right? That prohibition will be forbidden. Now, all these prohibitions that the Torah brings down in the book of Leviticus chapter 18, right? They have to see, there's a list. The Rambam says that in the Laws of Kings, he brings down forbidden relationships for non-Jews. Now, one of those forbidden relationships is homosexuality. That would be forbidden. That would be death penalty, even for a non-Jew, right? Beastiality also. Yeah, also forbidden. Also forbidden for non-Jews, also be a death penalty. Now, that being said, I would just say, the Torah doesn't say that, you'll tell me, this isn't very common, right? It's not a very common prohibition. Okay, let's say I didn't look up, see how many people, admit that they transgress, this is what they do. I'm sure it's alive and well. Right? I definitely think that. Right? But I don't think it's very high. I don't think it's a very high amount. But it doesn't matter. People say, well, Torah says don't steal. Isn't that obvious? Yeah. It's obvious. Torah sometimes tells us things that are obvious, but obviously there are other things going on behind the scenes. That it's not just don't steal. Right? Torah doesn't tell me how much or how little that a person may be liable for. Right? Even the Ten Commandments, just read the Ten Commandments on Shavuos, right? Yesterday, very good. If how many people were still wide awake while they were reading the Ten Commandments, okay. It doesn't matter. One of the Ten Commandments is don't steal. Most people are not aware that command means don't kidnap. How do I know? First of all, Rashi on the spot says it, but there are other prohibitions for not stealing. Yeah, there are other times the Torah says don't steal. So obviously, either you can tell me it means don't steal, but there's something else that the Torah's coming to teach me by not stealing. That could be, right? Maybe there's something missing that wasn't taught, before. Okay. Right? But if that's not the case, and we already know don't steal, and there's no context over here, it must mean something else. Has to mean something else. Right? The reason it has to mean something else is because the Torah's not going to waste time repeating things, right? Unless it has a specific purpose, right? There are a number of times you have to ask the question, If the Torah does not mince any words, why does the Torah go into such great detail? Right? We'll mention building the Mishkan. A lot goes into the building of the Mishkan, a lot, the tabernacle, a lot of chapters. You got the boards, the loops, the clasps, right? You got the menorah, you got the ark, you got the tables, you got a golden table, silver table, this, that, all these details. Book of Leviticus, where do you have a lot of details? And Saras, whatever Saras is is a physical manifestation of a spiritual, doing something spiritually wrong, i.e., speaking Lashon Hara. So go onto your clothes, go onto your house, right, etc. Back in the day, if someone got Saras, you had to be outside of the camp. The Kohen had to come visit you after a week. The only way to get rid of Saras in general is repentance. Nothing else. There's no Chinese medicine. There's no, regular medicine. There's no, I don't know, whatever other type of medicines out there. That would help Saras. The only thing that would help Saras is 100% repentance. They have to understand the person's outside the camp, right? He can't go back in. He's going to be embarrassed, that's for sure. Right? Get all these spots all over his body, right? Let's say. And he's got time to think, right? He's away from his family, he's away from everybody, right? He's in his own world, so to speak. Okay, so when the Kohen comes back, unless there's true repentance, nothing can help. Alternative medicine, that was the word I was thinking of. Alternative medicine won't help. Acupuncture won't help. Chinese medicine won't help. None of these things will help. One thing will help. Repentance. The only thing. So you have many, many verses, speaking about that, as well. Those are the only things besides the curses in the Torah at the end of the book of Leviticus and the book of Deuteronomy that speak at great length on like one topic. Like this week's parsha got a lot of different things. The longest Torah portion, 178 verses. Right? You got a lot, 176. 176 verses. You got a lot of verses. Speak about a lot, a number of different things. But each thing is like contained. It speaks about a sota, about a woman who wasn't allowed to be alone with somebody, and the husband warned her, and then they had to take her to the temples. She's going to drink this potion, see if she blows up or not, see if she's telling the truth. You have that, but that's self-contained. You have the Nazarite and the vow of the Nazarite, that's self-contained, right? You have other things that are self-contained. You have, a lot of verses about a lot of the about sacrifice by the princes of the tribes. Right, you got many, many verses. Okay, but that's like one thing. You don't have one, you don't have like so many topics, in the Torah that go into like chapter after chapter after chapter. You have a lot of times the Torah says about forbidden relationships. Okay. You have a lot of things that have to do with, with Meister, Truma, with, taking tithes in the land of Israel, Kohanim, and different things. Okay, but like, things come up. But, idolatry comes up a lot, right? Two things God hates more than anything else, idolatry and immorality. Right now, it could be. Now, we're going to have to see that verse in Leviticus chapter 18. We have all these verses against immorality. And then you got one verse about sorcery, right? And about idolatry. That's, two things God hates more than anything else, right? Someone once said, the juxtaposition of the verses mentioned this before by homosexuality. The verse before it says, it's talking about idolatry. Then it goes back to, homosexuality is forbidden, bestiality is forbidden. Someone says, juxtaposition of verses, which is true. You got to see how the verse is connected, which is a good question, right? But the person said, well, if it's talking about all these verses against immorality, and then it tells me, idolatry. Yeah, then it goes back to immorality. It must be that why to mention immorality, why to mention idolatry in between to show you these prohibitions are only forbidden when it comes to idolatry. All these forbidden relationships, right, including homosexuality, juxtaposition of the verses. right? Well, this person was saying specifically homosexuality. So we'll just use homosexuality, yeah? So verse before that says, it talks about idolatry, very good. Then talks about homosexuality. Okay. Oh, my obvious question was, you got 20 verses, 18, 19 verses before that, talking about immorality. So you have a good question. What's the verse doing there about idolatry? Good. So it's a legitimate question. Okay. Even if it's a legitimate question, there's only one problem. What do you do with the other 19 verses? What do you do with the other 19 verses? The other 19 verses talk about immorality. This nakedness you're not allowed to uncover. This nakedness you're not allowed to uncover. Right? All these different things all the way down. Now I got a verse about idolatry. Good. And then I got a verse, about homosexuality, bestiality. Very good. But I have 19 other verses. I got 94% of the verses in that chapter talking about immorality. Where do you take one verse out of context? Now you tell me, okay, there is such a thing of, of juxtaposition of verses. So obviously there's a reason it has to be there. It's not just thrown in there haphazardly, right? For sure not. Okay, it's a good question. But even before you get to the answer, what do you do with the other 19 verses? You can't tell me the other 19 verses just chuck away. If you want to tell me a couple verses, maybe we'll have a discussion on it. You got 94% of the entire chapter that's talking about immorality. You want to tell me one verse comes in and uproots all the 94% of the rest of the verses? Kind of hard to say. Kind of hard to say, right? So in those verses talking about immorality, right? In general, the verse over there say, okay, it's a forbidden relationship. You're not allowed to uncover the nakedness. Now, what if you uncover the nakedness? You didn't do anything else. You did not do anything else. Hard to imagine at that point. You didn't do anything else. Is it still forbidden? Torah says forbidden. 100% Torah says forbidden. You're not allowed to uncover the nakedness. Now we understand that relationship is going to be forbidden. They can't be married to each other, right? They can't be together. Can't be together intimately. So you say, well, let's say they're not. It's a platonic relationship. Okay. Are they allowed to be married? No. It's a forbidden relationship. Not allowed to be married. Now you come to this verse, and even the verse before, right? Talking about homosexuality. So some people will say homosexuality, what if they don't act on it? Well, they only think about it. Okay, it's a perversion. I don't think there's any question, right? Definitely a perversion. Certainly not the way God wanted it, but he allowed it to happen. But the Torah says it's forbidden. Okay. But so what if you don't act on it? What if you don't act on it? So the thoughts are bad enough, you'd be punished for the thoughts. Yeah? Even if you don't act on it. Okay. But really, so you still be punished either way. Yeah, you might not get death penalty for that. Right? You probably won't get death penalty for that. Death penalty will come when you act on it. So over here, technically you really didn't do anything wrong. Right? I mean, you're not going to transgress a Torah prohibition and get the death penalty for bestiality. If you have a dog, cat, whatever, right? That is, rubbing up against you when when you have no clothes on. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So what do you do? Right? So I tell you, obviously it's not a good thing to do. Right? And let's say it's a guy, again, we'll keep this clean. If he got excited, it's Torah prohibition for him. Right? That'd be Torah prohibition for him. Nothing the animal did over here. Right? But the animal being there is certainly not good. Right? 100%. Certainly not good, but that's not the prohibition. Prohibition of bestiality is the act itself. It's going to be the act itself. So, therefore, in this case, the question was, if the dog or cat or whatever animal there, rubbed up against you, sleeping wise, is that a problem? What if he's awake? I'll make it better. Let's say he's awake. Yeah, a dog rubs up against you. Yeah, is that a problem? Technically, no. That's not the prohibition. Again, I wouldn't say it's a good thing, but it's not the prohibition. Prohibition over here is exactly the act itself. The act itself. So that was the question. Someone asked, could it be of self-inflicted snake bite? Okay. Catherine the Great was bestiality. Oh, okay. I thought it was Cleopatra. I'll check that out also. I thought that's how Cleopatra died, but she died by snake bite. Okay. Uh, uh, so someone here says, all right, use the horse as a symbol. Ah, interesting. Okay. So this snake bite to her breast, locked in her mausoleum. Very good. Use the horse as a symbol. Yeah. So the Kabbalah aspect about a horse falling on her. I don't know if it's Kabbalah. I always understood. It could be it was Catherine the Great. Could be. Could be I mixed up Catherine the Great and Cleopatra. Right? I thought that's how Cleopatra died. But if it's Catherine the Great, then I've been corrected. So I have to look into that. It has nothing to do with Kabbalah. I mean, I don't think it has anything to do with I don't think that has anything to do with Kabbalah, but it was known somebody famous, way back died when, tried to have relations with the horse, they dropped the horse. Right? That's for sure. Right? That's for sure. So, okay, so if it wasn't Cleopatra, then good. Then it was Catherine the Great. So somebody died from it. Somebody died in either case. All right, so that's good. The answer goes is symbolism. Hope it must be greater meaning how Hashem dropped the horse on a humble the spirit. I don't know. Some things, I'll say it like this. Many years ago, at the beginning of AIDS, they say AIDS came from monkeys, wherever it came from, whatever. Doesn't really matter the source, but if a person got AIDS, how did you spread it? Either you spread it with using needles through drug usage or unprotected sex. That's normally how it gets transferred. Yeah. Now, somebody once said, well, if you think that's a direct punishment from God, you got something else coming. Like that can't be direct punishment. Again, we don't know why people die in general. Someone could do something now and God could pay him back, for something that was done 10 years ago. Yeah, and God calls it in. So it's not the act itself that happened right now. Okay. Right? Usually it's not the case. Doesn't really matter. But the point is, they had a death sentence on them anyway. So the question is how they're going to die. Okay. But I asked the person, I said, if that's true, yeah, and the person has unprotected sex, yeah, usually among homosexuals, a heterosexual can get it also, right? Also can get it. Okay. But I said, if two guys, get together, unprotected sex, and one of them passes AIDS to the other, yeah, forget whether the person dies or not. No, no, we'll make it easier. Let's say the person dies from it. Person got AIDS, dies from it. Yeah. Now, I would think it's relatively easy to say, even though you don't know that's why the person died. Could have been died from any number of things. But if someone, if someone did something and they died directly from that, now that's the cause of death. Doesn't mean that's like why they died, but that's the cause of death, right? We've spoken about before. But in this case, unprotected sex, drug use, whatever it is, in this case, we'll make it easy. Unprotected sex, yeah? Unprotected sex, one person had AIDS, pass it on to his friend. Yeah, very generous. Pass it on to his friend. Yeah, what happened? His friend caught it, very good. And then what happened? He got sick, he died. Yeah, World Magic Johnson's got HIV. Never, pretty amazing. He never got it somehow. Like a time bomb, waiting to tick. But it's kind of ironic that he got it many, many years ago. Many years ago. He got it and he never fully broke out in AIDS. But okay. And more or less that was probably caused by all his extramarital affairs and everything else. But okay, we don't need to go there. But I said, if that happens, right? This person said, you can't tell me that's direct. I'm like, you got a better answer? I mean, I wouldn't, it looks pretty clear. This is what you did. This is what the end result was. This person, your buddy gave you AIDS. Thank you very much. You died from it, right? The person died from it. Now that's pretty direct. Normally doesn't, if a person dies, it's not necessarily like he does one thing and boom. God's gonna say, okay, death penalty, and he dies straight away. And not usually the case. Usually, God's already built up a case against them, and however they're gonna die, they're gonna die. Whatever mechanism it is, doesn't really, it doesn't really matter. But I would say the vast majority of the time, a very, very high percentage here, that whatever the person died from, that's not the reason. That's not the reason. It's other things causing it, right? The example was of all these people died on October 7th. Now, there was a decree, we mentioned this before. There was a divine decree on Rosh Hashanah. That divine decree didn't get overturned by Yom Kippur or by, the last day of Sukkot, by Hoshana Rabbah, before Simchas Torah, before the last day of the holiday. Okay, right? So they had some sort of divine decree. We don't understand it, but the fact they desecrated Shabbos was bad. The fact there was a Buddha there, that was bad. The fact everything that was going on there, that was bad. But to say that's the reason, nobody said. Nobody said that's the reason. Probably 50,000 other reasons could have been why God had orchestrated that way, right? So we don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But there was a divine decree. There was a divine decree. God got all those people together, and at the same time, the ones who were supposed to die got killed in a horrific way. Absolute horrific way. Right? There's nothing to talk about. But to say that's the reason, a lot of people came up very quickly. Trying to say, oh, look this and look at that, look at the other thing. True. All these things were bad. No one disagrees. But pinpoint and say that's the only reason? I don't think it's the only reason. Definitely don't think it's the only reason. That it happened. I remember when Ariel Sharon gave up Gush Katif in the South many years ago, right? And shortly thereafter, he was in a coma, and he died basically in a coma years later. So some people want to say because he gave up this land down south, that's why he had all the problems now, with the Arabs because they gave all that land or whatever, nothing fortified around there. Okay. For whatever reason, people were quick to say that's why he had a stroke and was in a coma. So I remember, I mean, I'm not funny here, but I remember, I asked my Rabbi this question. I asked him this question. I said, is that direct correlation? Do you think it's a direct correlation or not? So he said, I don't know if it's a direct correlation or not, but he said, I don't think it's the worst thing he did. That wasn't the worst prohibition he did by giving up land. Now again, it's not an issue about giving up the land or not giving up the land. Yeah, it's not an issue whether you're allowed to give up land or not, if it's dangerous, whatever. That's not the topic. Yeah, but my Rebbe said that. Like, if you think about other things he might have done, right? He didn't keep Shabbos, he didn't keep kosher. First of all, wasn't Jewish either, right? So also people don't necessarily know that either. But okay, right? Other things he did were probably worse. That's what he said. That wasn't so. Gush Katif probably didn't help. Giving back the land probably didn't help. Yeah, and throwing people out of their houses and all that, giving them no compensation and all kinds of problems years later. Years later as well. Okay, but even without going on that was bad. And he sent them there. They gave him houses. They gave him all kinds of things to be there. And then 7 years later, 8 years later, took them out. Right? Threw everybody out. People were paying mortgages on houses they didn't have. So it's kind of whole crazy situation. But in any case, that's bad. You encourage people to go there and then you throw them out. Give them barely any compensation. You destroy their lives. Whatever. Okay, that's bad. I don't think there's any question. It's bad. Yeah. That's what my Rebbe said. It's probably not the worst thing. That's bad. Right? No question. No question it's bad. Right? No question it's bad. But is that the reason? Is that the reason? It's a different issue. Right? And that's a different issue. It's a very different issue. All right, somebody asked, let me get this question here. What should a person do? They walk into a store. The only person cash register is the man dressed like a woman. Well, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Take a gun and shoot them? Can't do that. Law of the land. But not only that, but you can't either way because being a cross dresser is not death penalty, right? Transgender is not death penalty, right? So you can't kill them, right? You can't kill them. So it's a total prohibition either way, but it's not a prohibition where it's not a prohibition where you get killed, right? If there's someone else that you can go to get served by, good. If they're the only one there, then nothing to do, right? What are you gonna do? Give them the money, they give you a change or whatever, and you leave. There's nothing else to do, right? You can give a big sigh and and a kvetch and whatever, and say, "Wow, what a horrific thing," but nothing to do in that situation. What is saras in English? They translate it as leprosy, but it's not really leprosy. They translate it as leprosy, but leprosy is very different. Not, it's definitely not the same. I don't know, maybe it's close in some ways, but it's not. It's not really the same. That's how they translate it. What symbolism does a house mean in the Torah or Tanakh? Sometimes a house can mean a spouse, a wife. Yeah. Um, it can mean a spouse because she's the one in charge of the house. She runs the house. So it could mean that. In general, it means a house. It means literally dwelling place. Right now, the other ramifications there, as well. But in general, it means a place to live. Right? And we're not looking at it any other. A house can also be based on Mikdash. Can also refer to God's house, i.e., the temple in Jerusalem. Right? Can also relate to that. Those are things that it can, relate to besides being known as, like a regular house, in general. When I mentioned Catherine the Great died from having a stroke. All right. Famous people fell off and died from horses. All right, whatever. I'll see. I'll take a look. Obviously, there has to be somebody, somebody famous, that died. Unless it's a myth. It could be a myth. It could be a myth. But I do remember, like I said, I thought it was Cleopatra. Someone who says Catherine the Great. I don't know. I'll dig in and look and see. But someone famous definitely died. Right? Unless it's a myth. Unless like it never happened. Maybe it never happened. I don't know. Right? But it would be surprising. Because you're talking about, when Egypt was extremely immoral, right? Which I'll speak about in the coming weeks in the book of Leviticus, chapter 18, right? Extreme is one of the most immoral places. So that's one of the questions, like, what could God expect from the Jewish people being in Egypt? Learning from the Egyptians, like, what did God think? That's where they learn, what do you call it? Lesbianism is forbidden because of what they did in Egypt. Yeah, we don't learn out as a Torah prohibition per se. There's certainly a rabbinic prohibition. Yeah, but they learn out from the verse to say don't go in the ways of the Egyptians. One of the things not going in the way of Egyptians is by lesbianism. So that's what they were guilty of, as well. But it was the most like immoral place, certainly at that time. So stick the Jewish people in such a place and expect them to be choir boys and expect them like, no one's going to sit over here is very hard to understand. Especially 80%, didn't go out of Egypt. But I mean, to stay, pure and pureness of thought when all that's going on around you is unless you had the Jews like totally separated from the Egyptians, which wasn't the case, right? Except the Jews that were in Goshen that were separate, the Levites that were separate, okay. And then, and the Kohanim were separate, but everyone else. I mean, everyone else is like, walking around. It's like walking around a brothel. Like, how in the world is anyone going to stay pure? It's very hard, right? If not almost impossible. But, when it says don't go in the way of the Egyptians, there's a whole laundry list of forbidden relationships. That's what's going on in the place. It could be by, stealing, there's idolatry, other bad things going on. Yeah, other bad things going on as well. But that's like top of the, that's like number one over here, things going on. Someone asked, what part of Israel am I in? Outside of Jerusalem. About 11 kilometers outside of Jerusalem, which is right near Rachel's tomb. Actually, not so far from Rachel's tomb, even though the back way to go there, a safer way to go. Go straight through Bethlehem. Otherwise, Arabs would probably kill you. But yeah, not actually not so far. Someone asked, I understand God punishes people, go against him. Why would he make those who are trying to do good and get close to him suffer? Why do you think? Question comes up all the time. I want to ask it. Millions of people ask the same question. Why? Comes along, remember, we always say the Or Chaim HaKadosh brings down in Leviticus chapter 10. Or Chaim HaKadosh, from the great commentators of the last 100 years, brings down from the Korban Aaron, not sure where the Korban Aaron was, by the death of Nadav and Avihu. Why did Nadav and Avihu die? So the Gemara gives a whole number of answers. Yeah, why potentially they died? They could have been considered greater than Moshe and Aaron, but why did they die? Says the Korban Aaron, he doesn't take any of those answers. Korban Aaron says because they were very close to the king. And when you want to be close to the king, especially the King of Kings, you have to be tahor v'nok. You got to be pure. You got to be pure in heart, pure in mind, pure in action. So the example we always give is if a person is second in command, right? Imagine Joseph, second in command to his viceroy, right? I don't think people use that word today, but whatever. Viceroy, second in command to Pharaoh. Yeah. If he did anything wrong, let's say even something minor, what could Pharaoh have said? Pharaoh could have said, you dirty Jew, whatever, what am I doing? He kills him. Now, I could have done something minor. Yeah. Now, if someone low man on the totem pole, no pun intended, stole something, did something wrong, don't you think Pharaoh's got his lackeys take care of him? You think Pharaoh's going to get upset? Why is he going to get upset? He got his lackeys take care of him. Beat him to a pulp, destroy his family, whatever. They'll take care of it, right? Not a problem. Joseph got caught doing anything, even something really small. Why would he get punished? Why would he get severely punished? Why would he may even lose his life? He may lose his life because he's second in command to the king. A lackey who's, a billion times less than the king, king's not going to care unless he did something really, really bad. Because the king has to get involved, right? The mail carrier, the bottle, the water boy, whatever. God, the king's not going to get his hands dirty dealing with somebody like that. But second in command? Second in command? Yeah. King's going to say you look better without a head. Anyone else would have done it, he probably wouldn't have cared as much. So when you want to do the right thing, when you want to become closer to God, the stakes are very different. Very, very different. So you think you have a heart now, wait till you become a Jew, right? Wait till after, final conversion over here. Then you're judged every second of every day. Things that you think, things that you do, things that you say, right? All kinds of things on a daily basis. Now, that being the case, you want to draw close, the stakes are very different. If you're a potato farmer in Idaho, no offense, anyone's a potato farmer, grew up in Idaho, right? What's the issue over here? I'm going to deal with you in a different way. You did things wrong. Okay. So God was going to cut you a lot of slack. Everything you did for a lot of things will be like you did it by accident because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know the Aleph Beis. You don't know anything. Okay. But if you know something and you're striving to be at higher levels, that's great. But there's also payback. What's the payback? The closer you are to the king. As we always say, the closer you are to the king, you get burnt. It's a catch-22. Yeah. You take me, for example, right? I always like to use myself as an example here. Become religious, got to fight against family, like all these things. And then, one day everything, seemed to be going good in other ways. So all of a sudden, boom, you have everything taken away. If everything taken away. Yeah. What about all the people you helped? Right? Someone asked the question, what about all the people you helped? Did you feel any guilt? I would have felt bad. And if a person would say it wasn't worth it, guess what? You lose all your mitzvahs. You lose every single one of your mitzvahs. So then the question is, okay, you're thrown down and you suffer for the last 20 years or more. Sometimes better, sometimes worse. Okay. So you suffer like a dog. Some of the decisions you made were bad, suffer in other ways. Okay. Yeah. This is still the best way to live. There's no question. Even if it's all taken away. Yeah. Imagine if a little birdie would have said, 25 years, you're going to be like this, and this is going to happen, but you have to go through 23 years of hell. We're going to sign up for it. You say, no, don't do it. We're going to grow. You're going to have this. You may be able to give over to others in different ways, blah, blah, blah. But you wouldn't be the same if you didn't go through it. Okay. Is it worth it? What do we say every day in our prayers? We say, don't bring me to trials and tribulations. But you don't grow without them. It's catch-22. How many people have had it easy at money, at fame, and other things? How many people have had it easy and are worshiping God in the right way? Very, very few. Because they have everything. I'm a self-made man. What do I need anything for? Kol votzim v'yadi asu et hachayil hazeh. We say in the book of Deuteronomy, I did it by the work of my hands. God didn't help me. I did everything myself. Really? You're not thanking God for anything? Okay, so God's going to say, I'm going to make you successful. I'm going to give you all kinds of money. I'm not going to have any connection to you. You're going to lose your portion of the world to come. Yeah? You won't have any portion of the world to come. Why do you think God gives so much money to Reform and Conservative Jews? And they raise more than probably $1 billion a year, giving it to, horrific charities and who knows what. Right? Planting so many trees in Israel so the Arabs can burn them down. Right? Why do you think he's giving so much money to them? Because they don't want to have any connection to them. He's going to give them, if they did any mitzvah in this world, he's going to give it to them in this world. He'll give the reward for it. He's going to wipe them out in the next world. But you say, you got plenty of heads of yeshivas that are glorified fundraisers, that have to go from place to place, pushing dimes and dimes together, trying to keep the yeshiva going, for good things. Okay. There are different reasons. Torah, you want to acquire it, it takes a lot of effort. 3 things: Torah, Eretz Yisrael, and Olam Haba. Now, a person will say, okay, I'm willing to struggle. I'm willing to fight for it, but I don't want to fight that hard. It shouldn't be that hard. Pick your poison. Yeah, doesn't get more meaning in life. See, a rich person and a poor person both have challenges. The rich person is going to be thankful for what he has and help others with their money, right? That's a challenge. Is it going to be haughty? Right? Is it going to be gaivadik? Is it going to be conceited? Think he's God's gift to the world, think he is God. Yeah, power can do that. But, I remember one thing in my 9th grade social studies class. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. You see, people had power or were thirsty for power. They thought they were God themselves. Absolutely thought they were God themselves. Right? Go back in Israel, get Pharaoh. Yeah, God tells, Moshe, go to the river, go speak to Pharaoh. Why did he go to the river? Rashi says, why did Pharaoh go to the river? He called himself God. He made the world. Well, if you're God, you don't need to go to the bathroom, right? Keep this clean. What was he doing by the river? Relieving himself. So Moshe comes up. He's like, Pharaoh, how you doing? Pharaoh's kind of busy at the moment. How could you think he's God? How in the world can you think he created the world? Right? He's human, right? You're not stupid, right? But, people think they can do anything. They have power. They have money. They're big CEOs, this and that. Who knows what goes on behind closed doors, especially, government, who's paying off this one, who's paying off that one, you got people that die mysteriously that, connect to certain people. And, I'm not saying I'm a conspiracy theorist, by nature. There's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of corruption. Yeah. What leads to corruption? Greed. Right? A lot of times. Greed and power. I'm gonna wash this person's hand to get this favor, get something else from someone else, even if to do underhanded things. And there are plenty of people, that that they get caught doing underhanded things. Sometimes they come back, they don't come back. It's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing to think about it. Some people we thought were dead and buried, came back like unbelievably. Take someone like Clinton, right? He never should have got out of the primaries. Back in the day, anyone remembers. He never should have got out of the primaries. Obviously God wanted him in power. With all the scandals and everything else, they almost got impeached in the end. But God wanted him in power. People think they can do anything, right? Especially the higher up, in a company or, in politics or whatever. I mean, people do all kinds of underhanded things. I want to know how politicians make so much money. That's what I want to know. If they're getting paid, let's say 150,000, 170,000, whatever it is, how do some of them have like billions? Where are they getting money from? Is that good investments? Okay, but how much can investment make? I'm not saying everyone's doing underhanded things, but it's very tempting. Very tempting. Anything goes on in Washington, it's all bribes. That's what it is. It's politics is corrupted. I'm not saying every single politician not going to go that far, but still. So we have challenges. Everybody has challenges. If you want to acquire Torah, right? We just went through 48 days. 48 days of counting the Omer till, what do you call it? Till Shavuot, 50th night, right? Count 49 days because that's what the Torah says, 7 times 7, 7 days, 7 weeks. It's 49. The 50th day is Shavuot. I told somebody, on Shavuot night, I said, oh, did you count? They're like, what do you mean? There's no count. There's no 50th day. Someone was half asleep. I was half asleep. And I said that, they woke up and they decided, no, this is the 50th day. They're like, wait a minute, there is no 50th day. 50th day is Shavuot. It's only 49. Right? Anyway, bad Shavuot joke. But in general, you want to acquire Torah. The Gemara says clear, it's going to be hard to acquire. So that answers your question. So why does that have to be so hard? Because Torah is hard to acquire. If you want something so valuable, right? As King Solomon says in Proverbs, it's worth diamonds, it's worth more than diamonds, rubies, gold, right? It's worth more than anything else. But to acquire it, you got to work hard. And what about all the bad qualities we have? All the bad character traits. I mean, if a person really looked in the mirror, like let's really be honest. If a person really looked at the mirror, and you're gonna do an honest assessment, like without throwing yourself totally under the bus, you're gonna do an honest assessment. Let me ask anybody, myself included, you're gonna take that honest assessment test. Who's gonna be alive at the end of the day? If God doesn't have mercy. If God would judge us according to strict justice, look at Rabbi Akiva, how he lived his life, according to strict justice. Yaakov Avinu, according to strict justice. Look how hard their lives were. God, there are some people who can live their lives that way. Okay, most people can't. God wanted to create the world entirely, with justice. God saw the world couldn't be established, so what did he do? He meted it with compassion. So now, if God didn't have compassion, if we take compassion out the window, like you throw it out the window and you crush it, and now you take an assessment of your life, just that day, right? I'm going to be generous here. Just that day, even if you had a great day, you prayed very well, spoke to others very well, interacted, or whatever. Go through, a laundry list of things. What you thought about, other things. How many people are seriously going to pass the test and get an A? I'm not talking about getting a C- and surviving. I'm talking about getting an A. My Rabbi brings down a very, very scary thought that each day there's a judgment on that day. On that day itself. The person's going to get upstairs and see some days did very well. Some days didn't do so well. The person be like, their soul be like pockmarked, with a fork, like bam, bam, bam. It's like, whose soul is going to be totally complete? So now you ask the question. You understand God punished, okay? Why is he choosing to make that? Why is he choose close them to make them, to make them suffer? So a person's really close. What does the suffering do? what does the suffering do? Suffering cleanses the person. Cleanses the person of sin. If we would know what the suffering did for a person, how many sins it wiped away, we'd sign up for more suffering. What's the problem? What's the obvious question? Nobody can withstand it. Suffering is hard. Nobody wants it. Right? Now, keep in mind also, if a person is dying, right? If a person is dying and they admit that all the suffering is because of their sins, they get a kapar. They get atonement. It might not be a full atonement, but they get a lot of their sins get wiped away. If a person would say, woe to me, I'm suffering this way, suffering that way, suffering the other way, they don't say it has to do with what they've done. They don't get the atonement. Yeah. So really, we should want more suffering. We should desire more suffering. What's the problem? Nobody wants to suffer. Well, look what suffering does. Let's say in my case, I would have been given a choice. And the choice would have been, I can take you now, because you deserve to die for whatever reason. Yeah, you have little kids, your wife, whatever. I can take you now, and that'll help you tremendously in the next world. Or instead of that, you're going to use up a lot of your extra lives. So I'll take your money instead. Now, if you would see the bigger picture, what would a person probably say? Now, some might say, let me die now. Let me have my portion of the world to come. We have a great portion now. Whatever happens to everyone else, whatever. What can you do? You think for yourself. Think about yourself. Then a person will think, someone may say, no, you can't leave them by themselves. You have to help bring them up. You're given a second chance. But I could have taken your life. Yeah? Forget all the other things around that come with this. People saying things, should have done this when you had money, should have done that when you had money, should have done the other thing. Okay, everyone's a Monday morning quarterback. Yeah, everyone's got what to say. Okay. So whatever you did was wrong. Okay. Isn't that bad? Isn't that worse? Get kicked when you're down? Yeah. I think of the alternative. Let's say you knew that what the alternative was. You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't see your kids growing up. Wouldn't see kids married. Wouldn't see grandkids. You lose a lot. You lose a tremendous amount. Now, we're not given that choice. Nobody's giving us that choice. But if you knew that, wouldn't it look different? But you see, we can never know. We can have intuitions, this, that. We can never know for sure why we go through anything. Yeah, but at the end of the day, what does it do to us? Now, for some people I've heard a number of times, going through this process seems impossible, right? And all that, they become bitter. Now, let's say they finish the process. Let's say they actually convert. It's finally done. There are some people, even though they're happy to be Jews, they're happy they went through it and they finished, okay. They're bitter. Bitter at the rabbi, bitter at the Beastiality, bitter at other things. It's not going to help them. It's not going to help them be good Jews. Because all they're going to do is badmouth against other Jews. And I had someone, thank God, not a student of mine. And the person, right, left, and center. That's all they do. That's all they do. Badmouth the Beastiality. They say it's because of, the color of their skin. And they were discriminated against. And this and that went like rampant. Rampant. Against rabbis, against Beastiality. They ended up converting the end. Okay. So this person, got an axe to grind. Totally has an axe to grind. Again, there could be things that were harder. Could be. Could be maybe there is a test of sincerity, this, that. But how is that bitterness going to help? You're going to stay up all night on Shavuot. You're going to still have this bitterness in your heart? What's that going to do? You're going to walk in the synagogue, have a chip on your shoulder? Everyone's looking at you? Oh, they don't think I'm really a Jew. You can speak Lashon Hara against everybody or against a lot of people. Yeah, it's not going to help you. Just the opposite. You have an axe to grind. Okay. There are some people like that. They'll just tell everybody off because they think they're right. They have some sort of chip on their shoulder for whatever reason. Again, I'm not saying it has to be so hard. On the other hand, the bottom line is when you want to be close to the king, there's payback. There is payback. So don't you think if a person's like, they're on their knees, they're down to the last $1.50, they have no idea where money's coming from? Don't you think they pray differently? Don't you think they serve God differently? They should. 100%. Doesn't make it easy. Does not make it easy. Someone will say, well, back in the day, we were whistling Dixie. No, certainly not. I complain the person, stole my money, and some of my father's money, some of my mother's money, not all of it. Yeah, I told what this guy was doing after the fact. People would be worshiping my boots. They look at my boots. They knew. It's a horrific thing. I had to hear this guy's name in my face every week. Horrific. That's what I had to go through. One time my Rabbi this question, like, he wouldn't tell me why I had to go through it. I mean, whatever. I was like, can't you just give me an inkling, something? It's one thing you have a test, right? Again, I'm just venting here, but it's one thing a person has a test. Okay. But if you have that test in your face for like 20 years or more, it's kind of a hard test. Kind of a hard test. No, the other people say I've had tests for longer. Okay. I'm talking about me, right? I live in this world like everybody else. Yeah, that's kind of a hard test to have in your face. It's one thing you don't hear about the guy, wherever he is. Okay, so let him rot wherever he is. Okay, God take care of him. Fine. That wasn't the case. I hear about this guy all the time. I'm not gonna say how and why, but I can put my trash out there. But still, that's a hard test. When you have a test and it's over, sometimes maybe it comes back a little bit, whatever. Okay. But if you have this thing in your face all the time, and you're like gotta make peace with it, like, it's very hard. It's very, very hard. Yeah. I know why God picked me for that test. Can't answer. I mean, I have some ideas, but it doesn't really matter. Pick me for that test. That was a rough one. Yeah. I mean, guy's dead now, but okay. Yeah, still. Damage done. Damage certainly done, no question. But that's what God wanted. He used him as a vehicle. He was the stick. Okay. I'm a lot stronger now, 20 years later. Give it over much stronger, different ways. I'm not gonna say it was easy. Definitely not easy. Would have been easier if the guy fell off a cliff afterwards. That would have been easier. Or just rotted in jail and died. Okay. But there was no closure. There was no closure. And what's in your face all the time and there's no closure, it's a hard test. Very hard test. But I said to somebody once over the years, I said, the last number of years, you can count on one hand where I open my mouth. One hand. Count on a couple fingers. Maybe I had weekdays. I open my mouth, but like, why are you justified? You're not justified. What do you mean I'm not justified? Not justified? Not human? I don't have feelings? Like, were you kidding? That was a hard test. It was a very hard test. I'm not saying I passed it, by any stretch. But, you learn enough Chovos Levavos, you see the bigger picture, made it easier. Made it a lot easier. But back in the day, ooh, yeah. God gives, so you gotta say, did God give you a trial you couldn't handle? Obviously not. Came out of it. Yeah. I'm saying that with everything the way I should have, okay, in certain ways. Never heard a peep. 20 years, not a peep. Not about being ungrateful. Not about, oh, I should have done this, should have done. No. What happened? What happened? Above nature. Nothing like that happens above nature. That means God wanted it to happen. Because nothing could have done. No one would have suspected it. Okay. And that sting more? Sure does. Yeah, but you see, God's the one in charge. And even after the fact, things were better, things were worse, this, that. Always had a place to live, always had food. Now my kids, thank God most of them turned out okay. Yeah. It's what to be thankful for. I was on two continents in 3 years. Who knows what could happen? Could have been a lot worse. Could have been a lot worse. But see, even someone who's poor, forget being on the other side, it's another issue. But even someone who's poor, you got to be thankful in the little that you have. Yeah. Even if it doesn't look pretty, it doesn't matter. The fact is, you have. You're not on the streets. Yeah, you're not starving. There are a million things to be thankful for. Sometimes when you're in the dirt, you're in the muck, and you don't see any way out of it. Yeah, it's painful. Yeah, especially when no one comes straight in general. Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's like when I when I got stuck in a subway station, my token got stuck. I was running 100 miles an hour to catch the train. And it got jammed. I went flying, only in New York. Some guy was over, was like, wow, that looks like it hurts. I just kept walking. Maybe I was in the Midwest, somewhere else. Okay, someone help me out, this and that. I was like, I'm in the wrong place. I'm in the wrong country. Yeah. That's it. People will be sympathetic. Some people won't be sympathetic, so to speak. You live to learn, or you learn to live. What people do or what they don't do. When you have expectations, bad news. Yeah. You count on some people and they don't come through, bad news. Yeah. But sometimes you have to come on to other people. Yeah, sometimes you need help. Okay. We don't want to rely on other people. What happens when you're down? Like, now, sorry. Should have done this. You should have done that. Should have done the other. Like again, everyone's a Monday morning quarterback. It's like saying, "Oh, look like must have hurt," and they walk away. It's a hard test. There's no question, right? But what do I know now? It's me and the Abish. It's me and God. Yeah. So what did that do? It made me stronger. In many ways. In many ways. Just goes to show you don't rely on man. You only rely on God. Why would God do it? And a number of reasons. But he gives me the ability to speak about it and speak about it a strong way because I myself went through it. So no one can say, oh, that's your theory. Not my theory. That's what happened. That's exactly what happened. Yeah. No exaggeration. Couldn't that break a person? Oh, you would think. Could break a person. Could easily break a person. But God knows who he's testing. He knows exactly who he's testing. Since he knows who he's testing, he's not putting someone in a position that they can't handle. Now, you might think, I might have thought, like, why do I get this test? I had plenty of other tests before. Why this one? So I think part of it is, I'm not saying that this is the reason. Could be Mr. S, the Satan evil inclination comes along and says, listen, you gave money, you took care of his needs, see what he's going to do when he doesn't have the money. Because I always says, yeah, even if I had the money, I'd be doing what I'm doing. So let's see. Let's see what he's going to do. I'm not saying that's what happened. Probably not, but I'm saying just in theory. Yeah. Always got to be careful what you say. Now, I've lived up to that, to a large extent. I am still doing what I'm doing. And before I got involved giving all these classes, still, it can come at a price also. But the point is that draws you closer. I'm not pushed further back, and I never asked the question. Well, how'd you put me through it? And now I can't help anybody, and this and that. Okay, I didn't ask that question. Could have, but what's the point? That's being angry. One of the worst transgressions. Right? You gotta be thankful for what you have. Or what you had. Okay, now it's a different chapter. Now you gotta do other things. Okay. But I'll tell you what one question I did have. If I didn't have any talent, I couldn't give over anything or whatever, I'm in the wrong field. Okay. That, fine. I had a friend of mine went to yeshiva, wanted to do Jewish outreach. Wasn't so good at it, became an accountant. I know he still has a lot of guess, doesn't have a lot of guess, whatever. If you're not talented in something, you move on to something else. But if you're at the peak and you're doing good things and whatever, when all this money was taken away, so why should this person be able to do it? If I didn't taste like a little bit of success, if I had no success, let's say, I would have been stronger. Would have been much stronger. I would have said, fine, I'm not cut out for this. It's not in me. Whatever. Okay. I'll find something else. Right? I'll do something else. I thought we didn't need the money at that point. Okay. So the answer was, this is very hard to take. Basically, the answer was, sometimes you got to do other things. You can't just do what you want. You want to do it on the side, okay, whatever. But you got to do other things to put food on the table, right? That was a very hard thing to hear. I can tell you, very hard thing to hear. Even if it's true. So then the question is, if you got God-given talent, he gave it to you, so why can't you use it? Why should you be able to use it? What was the answer? You can use it in different ways, but not this way. Other things have to happen. Other things you have to do. Okay? That was my question. Wasn't bitter necessarily, right? But if you get tremendous enjoyment doing something and, you have the talent to do it, why shouldn't God allow you to do it? Yeah, that was my question. That was my question. All right, let me deal with some questions here. So I hope that answered. I hope I answered that. Oops. I hope that answered that question. It starts like psoriasis. No. I can tell you personal experience with psoriasis, but it's, again, person spoke Lashon Hara, there were these spots and whatever it was, right? It was a physical manifestation of a spiritual disease, right? It's nothing like what we know it is today. Is there a book I can recommend on symbolism in the Torah and Tanakh? One good book is The Living Torah by Rabbi Kaplan. That's a very good book on the Torah. The Living Torah by Rabbi Kaplan. It also affected someone who says non-biological entities too, such as home and furnishings. Yeah. Affected the house, affected your shirt. Person could have spots on their shirt also. Someone says, what's the festival of Shavuot about? I heard it's not about the day the Torah was given. The Torah was given afterwards, yeah. But we're commemorating. I mean, essentially, that's what you're commemorating. It's commemorating the fact that God gave the Torah to the Jewish people. Even if it's not necessarily on that same day. Right? It's a question exactly what day it was, but that's not really the point for now. But the point is we're commemorating the fact of the importance of giving the Torah at that time, even if it wasn't on that day. Lord Jacob said, short and evil have been my years. That is, so by Yaakov, that's a hard thing to understand. He suffered a lot, that's true. Right? I've always want to look into it further. When he says that, why is he not punished for that? It's as if to say he's not thankful. You're not thankful for what he had. Not thankful for what God gave him. It's hard to say. Right? It's impossible to say. He wasn't thankful. Yeah, he showed a lot of things. But the fact that he said my days were evil and short and whatever, it's a very hard thing to understand. It's a very hard thing to understand. Because there he's calling the question why he had to go through what he went through. Right? And if he's the pillar of truth, then that shouldn't be the case. It's good. Whatever. It's a good question. Right? Now again, he lived his life according to strict justice. Because he lived his life according to strict justice, so he went through a lot more suffering. But also made him great and made all his kids great also, because he was able to pass down, the Torah to them in that way. The suffering atoned for unrepented sins. I know some were stoned by Yom Kippur, but I thought they were contingent on tshuva. Suffering is not going to atone for everything. Not going to atone for everything. Keep in mind, a person goes to Yom Kippur. The Gemara says if you go through Yom Kippur, and you don't believe in Yom Kippur, you don't believe Yom Kippur atones, you don't get atonement. Yeah. So suffering, you get atonement for certain things, right? It's not going to be for everything. It's not going to take away total atonement. Yeah. it depends on the person also. It depends what level of repentance that a person does, right? If a person really, whoever they spoke Lashon Hara about or whatever, they're able to get mechila, they were able to get, they're able to accept their forgiveness, and all that. They really repented to the highest level, and they got suffering. Yeah, that would wipe everything out, right? But for most people, it's going to wipe out a lot. It's not going to wipe out everything. Definitely not going to wipe out everything. But again, a person has to realize that if they did something they didn't repent for, or let's say we'll make it easy, they didn't repent. Not they didn't know, they didn't repent. They totally didn't repent. Why should suffering atone for that? They have to suffer for that, right? They have to suffer in the next world for that. And suffering in this world won't help. Should not help for that. Yeah. Let me see other questions here. Oh, someone says deeper meaning could have to be an unfaithful, ego-driven, yeah. Like by whores might mean sentiments or symbolizes. I don't know. Being very promiscuous, yeah, that's pretty clear. That's pretty clear. That that she was. But again, you come into royalty, we marry into royalty, you have all that power, like you can do anything, of course, other things are gonna go, right? What's the first thing probably that's gonna go more than anything else? Immorality. Yeah. So the amount of money a Jewish husband would give his wife upon divorce, stated in the marriage contract, fall outside of shared assets. Ooh. Doesn't fall outside of shared assets. Any shared assets, one of them has to buy out the other. Yeah. In other words, if the spouse, either they split it, right? 100%. 100% they split it, right? Let's say. That's one thing. He has to pay. Certainly if he has kids, right? No question, he's gonna pay a certain amount of for his kids. But if they had any shared assets, then they're gonna have to split it, right? Or maybe they'll offset. Maybe they have, a lot of different assets. Maybe they'll say, okay, you take this, I'll take that, you take that, or maybe they just split it down the middle, or they make a financial settlement. Could be there'll be a financial settlement if they can't agree, right? Which assets to give up. But the amount of money he has to give to his spouse and to his kids, that's one thing in the marriage contract. Things that came into the marriage, after, you're right, say they'll have to split it. That has nothing to do with this. They'll have to split it. They'll have to figure out how to split it. If you repent before he or she dies, he still be sent to go ahead and for bestiality and other things. The person, again, if they don't repent for everything, and they don't suffer enough, they'll have to go to Gehenna. They'll have to go to Gehenna. Yeah, most people are gonna have to go to hell, Gehenna, whatever you want to call it. Say rectification of the soul, spiritual rectification of the soul, which is a good thing if you get there, because then the soul can be fixed up, very good. But you'll have to be there at least 11 months. Most people will be there at least 11 months, unless you're totally evil, and that would be um, for 12 months. Most people are not that evil. Somebody asks, how do you know when someone is a tzaddik? They don't go walking around with with the thing on their forehead, but first of all, most people know, who's righteous and who's not. Certainly, certainly in the Torah world, I mean, some more and some less, but there are a lot of people very, very well learned. It doesn't, I'll give an example. Chofetz Chaim was known as the tzaddik of the generation. He was one of the most righteous of the generation. But he wasn't the greatest rabbi of that generation, even though he wrote a massive commentary on the code of Jewish law called the Mishnah Berurah, all about the laws of prayer, what we do during the day, all the holidays, and all that, and the laws of Shabbos and festivals. Right. Nonetheless, Rav Chaim Moiser, Grzinski, of blessed memory, was known as the greatest posek, greatest rabbinic authority, rabbinic decider of Jewish law. during that time. So even though the whole time had tremendous knowledge in Torah and Jewish law, right? He was known as the most righteous of the generation, not the greatest, let's say, greatest rabbi in Jewish law, during that time. Right? My Rabbi's told me this many times that he was known as the most righteous of the generation. Or Chaim Moshe was considered the greatest rabbi of that generation in Jewish law. So how do you know? How do you know who's righteous? Not all rabbinic authorities necessarily. So righteous, a lot of people also hide their righteousness also. But I would think that most rabbinic scholars, I mean, I'm talking top-notch scholars, they're righteous in their own right? Just by what they do and how they act. They can be righteous people, also not big rabbinic scholars, right? Again, it depends what they do. How can you know if someone's really righteous or not? So, unless someone's like, bona fide rabbi and whatever, doesn't mean people are perfect, but they see what they do and how they act, right? They see righteous acts that they do. Is Ben Sira irrelevant? No. The Gemara quotes it a number of times. Gemara quotes it a number of times, but it doesn't have practical relevance in our lives. Someone here says, I have a moron in synagogue calls me going, keeps asking me, what does pig ice cream taste like? Yeah, I'll tell you, it's like I had somebody, a Jew, I mean, it's also a Jew, I assume, but a Jew says if I breathe, now again, I'm saying it's a joke, but it's kind of silly, but if I breathe on your food, doesn't mean it's not kosher. It's also obnoxious. Yeah. Did say like kosher is like, it's like abracadabra, this, that doesn't really mean anything. Okay. So the person said, if I breathe on it doesn't mean it's not kosher. So what my quick answer was? So no, it's kosher. It's got bad breath on it. That's it. If someone keeps saying it, just ignore them. I mean, like, there's nothing else to do. I mean, you could punch him in the face, but I don't think that's gonna do anything. I don't think that'd be a good thing to do. You could confront him. I also think it's a bad idea, but you could confront him. They're like, why do you keep asking me then? Like, don't you know it's a Torah prohibition? Onus devarim? To remind someone of the past? Even if you didn't eat, pig with ice cream. I don't know. Whatever you ate, what do I eat shrimp? So, I never ate shrimp. Oh, really? You could lie also, but let's say, but if they remind you of your past, certainly as a convert, that's Torah prohibition. If they remind a Jew, say, oh, so, I remember you used to eat shrimp. Or you tell an Andre, I remember before you were a Jew. That's a Torah prohibition. 100% it's a Torah prohibition. So yeah, it's the person. How's he allowed to say it's a Torah prohibition, onus devar? Yeah, I don't know if you want to confront it, just ignore it. Some people are like that. I had students once, they were doing my machronim, right? Called the afterwaters. After, you eat bread, you have your meal, you wash your hands again. But I don't even know the reason that doesn't apply today. It doesn't matter. It's not the reason that's bad. Even if the rabbis gave 10 reasons, doesn't mean it's the reason. It doesn't matter. People wash their hands afterwards also. Yeah, so someone said a Orthodox Jew tells them living in one Orthodox community, tell them, why are you doing this? You're not even Jewish. It's also forbidden. It's like, oh, we're not Jews because we don't do this. So ask your rabbi if you should do it or not. If it says don't do it, okay. My rabbi says they should do it. Okay. So you're not Jewish, big deal. So what? You're allowed to remind someone of that. So there's no, I prefer vanilla ice cream. Yeah. You can joke about it. Put the person, offset the person what they say. I was like, oh, I never ate it. I used to eat it with chocolate. Much better with chocolate. I hear people say things. It's yeah. I mentioned some things people have said to me. Yeah, I got a better one. A better one. You're somewhere probably where you shouldn't be. Dressed like an Orthodox Jew. The person says, I'm embarrassed to be seen with you in public. I think that's worse than saying, oh, what does it feel like eating pig with ice cream? Imagine someone tells you this. It's embarrassing to be seen with you in public. That's pretty bad. Yeah, I got the message. First of all, not to go to such an event again, and whatever. I wouldn't do it dressed up the way I was either. But right? Okay, so God gave me a message. You shouldn't be at this place. Good. I got the message. You don't think that stings? Like saying, like, I'm disgusted by who you are. They want to puke. A Jew says this, not a non-Jew. Non-Jew, I understand. Yeah. I had someone tell me they're doing it in an obnoxious way. They're like, I'm offended by the way you dress. Prominent doctor in the community. I'm like, what's the problem with the way I dress? White shirt, black pants with or without pinstripes, dark blue pants with or without pinstripes, or dark gray with or without pinstripes, wear hat and jacket when I'm outside, whatever. I said, like, what's so bad? And the only difference is I wear a yarmulke and I wear tzitzis. Like, okay. So what's so bad about it? Makes them feel uncomfortable. Okay. Now the part, kind of taken aback when someone says that. Why do you dress like that? Okay, it's a legitimate question. Yeah, it's very different than saying, well, it's embarrassing to be seen next to you in public because it's like, today people would say you can't dress like that because you have a target on your back. Someone's going to try and shoot you or kill you or whatever. Because, how high anti-Semitism is now. All right, it's a different issue, but, don't show it. Someone told me they were in a hockey game a couple years ago. There's a visible Orthodox Jew yelling and screaming, whatever. This guy, whatever, somewhat religious, whatever. He pulls the guy down. He's like, listen, people can't see. Like, you shouldn't jump up and down. You give us a bad name. That's bad. That is bad. You want to cheer is one thing, but like within reason. Yeah, but to say, it's embarrassing to be seen with you in public, that's pretty strong. Pretty strong. Basil Franks and clothing on. Yeah. Um, um, all right. We're talking about fragrances. Yeah, again, at the end of the day, person says something, someone once said, whatever's the joke, why do Orthodox Jews wear polyester? And why do they smell? Now, first of all, not all Orthodox Jews smell. Yeah. If it's a hot summer day and it's Shabbos, you can't take a shower. Okay, so what are you supposed to do? You wash part of your body, not your whole body or whatever. But that wasn't even the case. General statement, why do Orthodox Jews smell? I don't know how many Orthodox Jews you come in contact with. Why they wear polyester? They don't have a problem with shotness. That's easy. Yeah, you don't have a problem with mixture of wool and linen. Right? But people aren't going to wear polyester. Polyester not so comfortable. Right? I lost all my suits when I went to South America, so I had to go, to a store and buy my broken Spanish and say I wanted a suit like Sin Lana, without wool. God thought I was nuts. Brought me cotton, brought me polyester. Okay. Until I got to a place where I could actually, check, if there's no wool and linen together, my kids would say, oh, you're doing something around the house wearing these clothes. I couldn't wear them anymore. Right? I got nicer clothes, obviously, but yeah, why do people wear polyester to get out of that problem? But not everyone wears polyester. I mean, it's just a stupid thing to say in general. It's like a survey. All Jews smell, really? Seriously? And people say the stupidest things. I mean, it's just, there are things that's not worthwhile to answer, right? They're just not worthwhile to answer. You can answer, if you had a snappy answer, you can answer something very quick, put them in their place. But like, if you don't have a snappy answer, what are you going to answer? What in the world are you going to answer? And then a person come on strong and say, hey, what are you getting so offended about? You just say all Orthodox Jews smell. It's kind of offensive. I don't know. Took a shower this morning, I don't smell. Yeah, I'm not in that category. If someone would be. Yeah, they're out, they're working out, whatever. So, they ain't get a chance to take a shower yet. But they're on site. What do you want from them? People say things like it's ludicrous. Yeah, I'm not even talking about what anti-Semites say. I'm talking about what Jews say. Some Jews. Yeah. You got plenty of people who didn't want to wear masks during COVID, so they single out Orthodox Jews. Again, probably a lot of people didn't want to wear masks as Orthodox Jews also. What about everybody else? What about everybody else gonna blame us spreading it? Live in, close quarters with other people. Of course it's gonna spread quicker. Yeah, why do you think it's gonna spread quicker? You got 6, 7 people in the same house. One person gets it, everyone gets it. It's the way it works. That's how most people got it. Not from synagogue. That was a lie. I think it said 4% got it from synagogue. Most people in contact with other people in their house. Most people. But Orthodox Jews live, in small quarters, right? You got big populations, in different areas, wherever they are. So of course, one person gets it in your family, most people are going to get it, most likely. That's where it happens. Say, oh, you're not wearing masks. Well, no, either is anyone else. So many other people aren't wearing masks. Not everyone was wearing masks when they should have. Guaranteed. Yeah, we're going to single us up. People make all kinds of statements. Just look at demographics. I can explain to you very simply how demographics work. I live in a city, 100,000 people, more than 100,000 people. Probably like 30, 40,000 kids here. Let's say. So some people get sick, it spreads all over. Okay. I mean, building after building, you have, let's say, 10 apartments in a building, right? Let's say 10 families. Not to mention, let's say, you have young couples in other parts of the building, let's say, okay. So what do you think? Look at the demographic. Look at the street. Look how many people live here. Not just here, in other places. If they're living in houses, doesn't matter. Living in closer quarters. So why do you think? We have more kids. You should have more kids. You're spreading the. Do me a favor. You got to pick your poison over here. Well, people say all kinds of ludicrous things. Yeah, and a lot of times, one or two people or more that go against the rules or whatever it is makes everyone look bad. Right? That's another problem. You can't do can't undo the damage. I can't even tell you how many times I've heard people say, Orthodox Jews this, Orthodox Jews that. A few people did things wrong. Okay. But I always remind the other person on the line is that, by the way, you remember who you're talking to? How's that being Orthodox? No, I didn't mean you. If I would have said against all blacks, Asians, or whatever, you call me a racist. You say it against Orthodox Jews, that's okay. We're open game. Yeah. We're not human. Rabbi Wine, he should be well on top, Jewish historians, of our time, once said many years ago, he said, if you hear how people speak on the radio against Orthodox Jews, if you would change the word Orthodox Jews for Arabs, there would have been, civil unrest. Civil unrest. Call Orthodox Jews, parasites, cockroaches, other things, right? If you said about Arabs, it burned down the cities. Yeah. Our own worst enemy. All right, let me see other questions here. Again, in any of these cases, most likely the best thing to do is just, is not to answer. That would be probably the best case scenario, because what are you going to answer? If someone makes a comment like that, we're going to say, no, just joking, whatever. But I would agree. I don't think there's any point. I don't think there's any point, to argue it back. They're it's like talking to a brick, right? Talking to a brick. Also, part of it could be, what's going to be your reaction? Yeah, what's going to be your reaction? Yeah, but again, it's painful. I would agree 100%. It's painful. Someone makes such a comment, you're trying to be a good Jew, and they keep reminding you, yes. I'd agree. How much patience does the person have? I can tell you over the years, someone would say something, I'd pounce on it straight away. Straight away. Much more mellowed over the years. Yeah, someone says something, yeah. I'll let it go. Someone says something second time, probably let it go. By the 5th, 6th, 7th time, I'm not going to let it go. Right? It depends. I don't have to jump on everything someone says. It'd be very easy to, but there's no point. It's wow, it's touchy, this, that. I'll give a general rule. The general rule is you say things when you have to. You absolutely have to. And a lot of times you don't have to. A lot of times you don't have to. It's all they're doing is trying to get a reaction out of you, in general, right? So, a lot of times I'm just, whatever. I'm not going to get baited in unless I feel it's something I have to defend. If it's something I feel I have to defend, whatever. Like, I'll give you one example. Someone's told the story that I got locked in my bathroom and telling someone, you can't pray in the bathroom. So the person asked, like, come you didn't pray, whatever. I said, because, I don't have to pray in the bathroom, even there's no, even there's nothing, in the toilet or whatever. So he said, oh, is that one of the rules? So my answer was, yeah, it's one of the rules. That's it. That's it. It's one of the rules. Answered it up. That was the end of the discussion. I gotta sit there and say, what do you mean? Don't you know? Forget it. The person wasn't interested. I know the person wasn't interested. So I gave a one-line answer. Yeah, that's one of the rules. That's it. Like, okay. But I answered something stupid. So, okay. I felt that day. Yeah, that was my answer. I could have gone on to this whole thing. Not sure what Torah is. And cleanliness in the bathroom. You can't think Torah in the bathroom. And there's nothing there. And why? Forget it. They weren't interested. Weren't interested. 10 seconds, I would have gotten words out of my mouth. Do they do that one of the rules? Yeah, it's an obnoxious thing to say. 100%. My answer was, yeah, it's one of the rules. That's it. That was the end of the discussion. Again, you don't have to always answer. You don't, sometimes we get, it's offensive. I would agree. 100% I would agree. And sometimes say, oh, what you get so upset about, whatever. Like, you don't have to answer everything. But sometimes you want to take a sledgehammer. You have to be nice. You can't say anything against them. Right? I think say, oh, why are you making this personal? You just said all Orthodox Jews smell. It's kind of offensive. Yeah. Even if it somewhat might be true, which it isn't. Well, it's obnoxious. You have a choice. You can answer with something snappy. You don't bother. You don't have to waste the time. I think Ari Kaplan, yes. Could I write the book? Yes. One second. It's called The Living God by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. Jewish people pray on their knees? No. The only time they pray on their knees one time during Rosh Hashanah and 5 times on Yom Kippur, where they bow. That's why the Arabs bow 5 times every day. They get on their knees every day, right? So the Arabs say the Jews only get on their knees once a year on Yom Kippur. Yeah, we're gonna be better than the Jews. We're gonna do it every day. Okay, good luck. Sometimes I'm on the bus, I'll see the Arabs like by a workplace or something. They're like on the ground. I'm like, good luck. 5 times a day, they're on their knees. Jews are only on their knees on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, one time during Rosh Hashanah. That's it. Someone there says, baited so they can react. Yeah. That's all they want. They want to get a reaction. And I'll tell you, unless you have to answer, you don't give them a reaction. There's no point. Yeah. I've gotten involved in things where I absolutely had to. If I didn't have to, I could let it go. I will tell you, some things it's hard to let go. I would agree. I would agree, even for me. Even for me. A lot of times I want to say something, I'm like, no. But there was something where I was at, and 2 people were talking about, red state versus blue state, the states, Republicans against Democrats, and Democrats against Republicans. I couldn't live in such a place, this, that. And I was like dying to jump in the conversation. Dying to jump in the conversation. Someone just pulled me away. It's like, don't even think about it. They're like, don't even think about it. I was like frothing at the mouth. I was like, come on. This is my thing right here, right now. They're like, don't bother. Right? Just get it out some other way. Don't, whatever. And do it. Someone asked to live in a great new human civilization, other plants allowed by the Torah. No. No, you're not allowed to play with creation. You see that. You take a donkey and a horse and you make a mule is sterile. You're allowed to do it. I mean, God allows it to happen. He doesn't want you to play with creation. You take a peach and a plum, you make a nectarine. You're allowed to eat it. right? God doesn't want you to play with creation, even for non-Jews, right? So making new plants and this and that. Somebody wants. Nobody's interested in. You might be able. You might get away with doing it, right? It might be, permissible, get benefit from it, but it doesn't say wants to do it. It's forbidden to sculpt if the sculpture isn't meant for idolatry. Yeah, yeah. That you gotta be careful because then you're making something in more than one dimension. So as long as if it's a human, you can make a face, you can make a bust, but you can't make a full body. Or let's say something more than one dimension by animals. By animals or certain animals, let's say on the Kisei cover, like a lion on the heavenly throne, say like a lion or something like that. So making full sculpture of it, that would be forbidden. If you make it, it's not exactly the same thing. Let's say you take out one of the paws or whatever, you don't make it according to the exact thing, then that would be all right. That would be all right. What is Torah concerning marriage made up of broken homes where children are from previous marriages? Um, so I would say that let's say a person marries the right person, right? Two Jews have half a soul, right? Half a soul, another soul come together. Very good. You have children, very good. And let's say it doesn't work out so much. Or let's say let's say you married the wrong person. Let's say you married the wrong person. You had kids, etc. And now you marry someone else. Right? Now you marry someone else and you blend families. So Torah says, okay, right? So you blend families. Now, blending families, not such an easy thing. It's certainly not an easy thing. But doesn't mean it's forbidden. Doesn't mean it's forbidden. And certainly, a person does get divorced. Certainly a guy should remarry and should have kids if he can, if possible. Now, does that mean if he's older, he should marry a much younger woman to have kids? I'm not saying much younger, but whatever. If she can have kids, good. If not, okay. A woman would rather be married than not be married, but that doesn't mean she has to just marry anyone for the sake of being married. Right? So again, a person gets divorced, other things could happen. A person be widowed even, right? You have kids, she has kids, or vice versa. Right? So Torah says, okay, you gotta, try and make the best of it. It's not an easy thing, blend families, but it doesn't mean it's forbidden. It's certainly not forbidden. Right? But it's just in general, raising these kids, whatever, it's not easy. 100%, it's not easy. Because people normally come with baggage. Also, second marriage is very hard in general. In general, because people have a lot of baggage, whether divorced, whether widowed, whatever it is. If they have kids also, and they have younger kids, to marry off younger kids or whatever, you still have kids at home. It's hard. Doesn't mean it's forbidden. Definitely doesn't mean it's forbidden. Angels, righteous and holy, or just holy? I mean, angels are created by God, right? They're created by God. They don't have free will, so they're always doing God's will. So they're absolutely holy. So there is an interesting thing. One thing we mentioned by quote unquote fallen angels with the Nephilim when they went into the body. So I wanted to mention that I said, when an angel goes into a body, they're more human, right? So they could sin because they're human. Now, an angel, even coming to this world, the Haggadah says that when God took the Jews out of Egypt, how did he take them out? Not through an angel, not through an intermediary, whatever. Why? Because had the angels even come down to Egypt, they would have been corrupted. Even not in the body. Right? Even not in the body. So I wanted to say, if they're in a body, they'll be more human. If they're more human, they're liable to sin. Right? It doesn't mean they're totally angelic. But if they would come in this world, let's say to save the Jewish people in Egypt, God says no, because the immorality was so strong, could have affected an angel also. Right? As well. Someone asks, living on other planets like Mars, creating their new civilization. Is that allowed by Torah? The simple answer is it's going to be a problem. It would be a problem because what are they going to do about Shabbos? When does Shabbos come in? That's the problem about being in space in general. Right? There was an Israeli astronaut that got killed, right, many years ago. Milan Ramon, anyone remembers? And the whole question where you're in space, how do you celebrate Shabbos? And, every time you go around the world, what do you do? Right? Listen, If you went up there, you could survive up there. You had a whole new civilization up there. You don't have a problem with a minion and kashrus and this and that. Okay, maybe it shouldn't be a problem. But I don't think a person would be allowed to put yourself in danger. I mean, consider danger, certain way to do it. But I don't think you're allowed to put yourself in danger to do that. If you had no choice, Earth's going to get destroyed, and you had to go to other places, maybe. But I don't, good for sci-fi movies. Yeah. Let me see any other questions. Um, Someone asks, I mean, stuffed animals. Some people would say non-kosher stuffed animals are forbidden. Um, if you had dolls, yeah, if you had dolls, right? No graven images. So many rabbinic authorities say you got to do something. You got to do something that you break something of the doll. Right? You got to do something like it's a girl and a young girl. You don't want to like scare the wits out of her, like take off the nose or take off an ear or something. Do it kind of inconspicuous. I remember I had this problem because one of my kids got one of these. Someone bought them whatever, very expensive doll. But again, it's forbidden. It's a forbidden thing. Yeah. So, we cut off part of the toes or whatever. They couldn't see. They couldn't see it. Not something graphic. I take off the nose. That would have been, someone would have saw it. They said, what happened? This it's, it's $250 doll or whatever it was, right? You took off the nose. You weren't careful with it. So we did something more inconspicuous. Yeah, yeah. So it also does the same thing. Take off the foot, take off of, some toes, whatever, but it's covered, right? So it's covered, you don't have a problem. Some say stuffed dolls replicate of one's child. Stuffed doll, usually we say by non-kosher animals. By kids, I would say even just replica, let's say, of a child. You do something small, take off part of it. I don't know. Something inconspicuous. You don't take off part of the ear or the nose or something that's gonna be like, it's gonna horrify someone. I don't know. Take off something more inconspicuous. Take off a toe, a couple of toes, something like that. Cover it up. You have to do something. You should do something. Definitely should do something. Well, taxidermy stuff and once alive, the animal uses trophies decoration. Um, yeah, I don't think it's a problem. Animals already dead. I can use it for whatever I want. Can I stick it on my wall? There's no impurity. I mean, if the time in the temple, that'd be a problem. That'd be a problem. But since that's not the case, it shouldn't be a problem. Again, if you the problem is hunting for sport. If the animal already died and now you're going to use it for you want to cut off the head and have it stuffed or whatever, it's one thing. Hunting the animal for sport for that purpose is forbidden. Hunting in general is forbidden unless you're starving, right? Very clear for non-Jews should be forbidden. It's cruel. It's cruelty to animals, in general. But to go after it, for that purpose, that'd be forbidden. That would be, if it already died, it'd be one thing. Yeah. But killing it for the sake of having it stuffed, is that considered a purpose? That considered a purpose or not? Good question. I would say if you're doing it for hunting in general, that would be forbidden. Otherwise, probably all right. It's probably about all right. Even the antlers, well, that doesn't matter. You can use any part of the animal for whatever you want. Decorations, whatever, it's fine. Alligator boots. Yeah, whatever, that's not a problem. Question would be, again, if you're gonna kill the animal for that sake, right? If you're gonna kill the animal for that sake, then in general, it's hunting. Hunting would be forbidden. If you came across animals died, it's different. Yeah. So we'll say if the animal's already dead, even someone else hunted it, you didn't hunt it, okay. You can get benefit from it. You didn't do anything wrong. Right? So you can use the head and whatever. Right? But the person hunting is forbidden. Right? It's definitely forbidden unless you're starving. Unless you're starving, you have no food. Someone here says my door handles in the cabin once I had were antlers. Okay. I know the relative that had I think they had a stuffed deer thing or whatever, moose or whatever. That they had taxidermy. that they had, whatever. I always used to say if you pet it, it growls or something. But anyway, it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a funny thing to see, like, in the middle of a person's living room, see like this huge head there. But again, if it died, you could do it, right? About bonsai is that altering since it restricts the natural growth of the plant. Graft again, if you're grafting from the same plants, not a problem. If you're grafting other plants together, that would be a problem. So it's from the same plants, not a problem. If it's from a different plant, that would be more of an issue. So the doll's hair was messed up. No, 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 no. You have to do something, like cut it off. Not just it's messed up. It doesn't do anything. Like you have to like take some part of it off, like part of the ear, part of the leg, part of the hand. Messing the kid's hair off is not gonna do anything, right? If you cut off all the hair and the child's bald, yeah, that might be good enough. I get it. It's a missing sibling. It's but it doesn't matter. It's still forbidden, right? So you got to if it's for a child, so I would make it something inconspicuous. You take off the ear. I think like one of my rabbis said, like, don't do that. Like, because the child gonna freak out. See this doll, supposed to be his brother or whatever, reminding me of his brother or sister. He's got no ear, or he's got part of the ear missing. That's scare the wits out of him, probably. Um, Someone says I hunt for food, not for trophy or sport. Should you refrain from hunting? Yeah, it's bad. I mean, I would say if you have no food, if you absolutely have no food, right? But then again, it's not gonna be kosher anyway. But if you kill it, still, unless the person was starving, I would say okay. But if a person's not starving, it's still really, it still really should be forbidden. Um, I would say, yeah, it's probably talking about time. It's cruel, probably, right? No bow hunting. It doesn't matter. Hunting in general. There's a famous response by the Maharal of Prague. That brings on sorry, not the Maharal, sorry, by Noda Yehuda, one of the great rabbis in Prague in the 1800s. Came out very, very strong. Very strong. Any type of hunting. Doesn't matter. Bows, not talking about guns per se. Right? Even with bows, it's cruel. Right? Hunting is cruel. Right? If a person had no other food and they were starving, okay. Right? That's a different issue. It's a different issue. Right? But if you're starving, anything goes. Right? Yeah, go ahead. If one captures without harming, that's okay. Grasping a fish. Fishing is different. Fishing is not hunting. It's different than hunting. You're allowed to fish. Right? That you're allowed to do. Fishing is not the same. You say, well, it's cruel like hunting. Not the same. Even though the animal gets scared and this and that, no one says there's cruelty to fishing. Fishing's a different issue. Fishing you can take. Fishing you can take as many fish as you want. Hunting's a different. Hunting animals, it's gonna, scaring the animal, chasing the animal. If dogs chasing the animal, whatever, it's considered cruel, right? Fishing is a different issue. Fishing is a totally different thing. Yeah. Any other questions? What's the real marriage between someone of different ages, like 20 and 40-year-old? I don't see it as a problem. 20-year-old wants to marry a 40-year-old. Yeah, I don't see a problem. You tell me 20-year-old and a 50-year-old, nah, I think it's a bit much. It depends. 20 years, 20 to 30 years, I wouldn't say it's such a big deal. Again, it depends on the age. Take someone who's 60, the girl's 18, yeah, it might be an issue. It's permissible. Not saying not. A little bit strange, but person can do it. Isn't actually bringing a dead body into your home, not necessarily. You discard the other part of the body. First of all, you're not bringing it into your house. You're not doing it. Someone else is doing it. Even if you would do it, so what? Let's say you would do it yourself. Animal died. You bring in the head. You know what you're doing to do taxidermy. Couldn't you bring it in? There's no impurity today, especially for a non-Jew. That wouldn't apply. Question is for a Jew. Yeah, but that doesn't apply today anyway. We're all impure, right? Temple has been rebuilt, so we're all impure. That's it. So, you definitely could do it. You could do it yourself. Someone has a moose head on the wall. Okay. Yeah, I think it's a glaring thing. I remember I had a relative that had you walk in the house, one of the first things you see, this big moose just looking at you. It's like, how you doing? You know? What about hunting coyotes that are stealing farmers' livestock? That you can do. That you can kill because that's a danger. That's a danger. That's a different issue. Yeah, that you're allowed to do. That, or you can put out poison and kill them. 100%. Yeah, because that's a danger. Here we have wild dogs that put all kinds of poison out against them. Yeah, I woke up one morning, saw by a trash bin like three or four. It's like wild dogs. Yeah, that's dangerous. That 100% is dangerous. Yeah, so you got coyotes or whatever, wolves, stealing. Yeah, you can definitely go after them. Yeah, you're hunting them to save your livestock. That's a different issue. That's a different issue. All right, I'm gonna stop here. Someone asked what's the procedure? One second. All right, I gotta answer these two questions. Just these two questions. Um, one second. What did I say this question? What if I tackle a deer? Can I have it for dinner? If you can kill it properly, yeah. No, that's a different issue. But again, again, you're not scaring it. You're not sending other, dogs or whatever to chase after it. That'd be cruel. So yeah, if you tackled it and you're able to bring it in, okay, right? That you could do. What's the procedure become a shochet? Shochet's a ritual slaughter. Then, first of all, you get to spend a long time learning the laws, and then you have to learn under someone how to do it. Very, very complicated. Very, very complicated how to do. I hear this question all the time. People say I can do it myself. You can't. I'm telling you, the laws are very extensive. Very, very extensive what you have to do. All right, I'm gonna stop there. Um, I do this every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 o'clock Israel Time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Chaim Kaufman. Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos and Q&As, Ethics of Our Fathers. Book of Leviticus. Want to send me an email, RabbiChaimKaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com. Wish everyone a good beginning of the day, middle of the day, end of the day, and everyone have a great